Welcome to Plus One Forward, the podcast powered by the Apocalypse, where we talk about tabletop role-playing games using or inspired by the Apocalypse engine. I'm your MC Rich, and I'm honored to say I'm joined by my guest Avery Alder of Buried Without Ceremony. Hey Avery, welcome to the show.
Hey Rich, it's really nice to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Tell me, Avery, how long have you been playing PBTA games, and what was your gateway?
My gateway to Powered by the Apocalypse games was Apocalypse World. I started playing it when it was still in the preview edition. I went down to a game convention called GameStorm in Portland, and several of my friends picked up the handmade, unique covered Apocalypse World preview book that came before the official release. And back then, playbooks were still little tiny eighth of a page folded booklets that came in like a Ziploc baggie.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and it was actually, it was really interesting. The table that I played with was myself, Daniel Wood, Adam Coble, and Johnstone Metzger, and I think there was one or two other people. But anyways, I think when we sat down and played Apocalypse World, it was so much fun. It was really good. And also I feel like we had differences of opinion about what the game fundamentally was. And it's not surprising at all that I went off to write Monsterhearts. Adam went off to collaboratively write Dungeon World. Johnstone went off to write, just 9 billion different games inspired by the Apocalypse. Johnstone is the most prolific writer I've ever witnessed the process of, I guess. But yeah, so my first exposure to the Apocalypse World engine was with Apocalypse World. And it was with a group that was super fun and full of contentions on a philosophical level about what the game, fundamentally was. And so, that's how I got to where I am now.
Can you remember far back enough to know, first of all, did you MC it or did you play?
I played, I believe that Daniel Wood MC'd, and my character was a Skinner, I believe.
Oh man, nice.
Yeah, she had been kind of treated like royalty in this other hardhold, where she was the first lady of the hardhold, or maybe just a concubine. It wasn't quite clear what her role or status was, but she definitely had power and luxury and privilege, and that all got taken away from her really fast when she was kicked out of the hardhold. And so she was kind of wandering the wasteland, confused, wounded, not knowing how to really scrounge and make it in the apocalypse because she'd never had that experience before. And then she wandered into town and did the best she could. That was my first Apocalypse World character.
Oh, that's awesome.
I don't remember her name, but it was something to do with like a whiskey metaphor. Whiskey something. But I don't remember what it was.
Nice. That is really cool. Yeah, my first playbook was a Skinner too, so that's really cool. All right. Well, you know what? Why don't we jump over and read a Sitch? How's that sound, Avery?
That sounds awesome.
Read a Sitch. Avery, you've got a lot of experience with this Monsterhearts game. A lot more than most. So I would think you might be able to give us a little expert opinion. In a con game of Monsterhearts, right, when you have a bunch of strangers who are coming together to play this game with a lot of expectations and maybe definitely a lot of world experiences, points of view, and there's a lot of intensity within a game of Monsterhearts, and it really is pointed to a lot of player versus player activity. How do you handle, or how would you recommend that other people handle, as an MC, covering for bleed for the players when those emotions can kind of rise to the fore and they don't know each other as friends, only in this interface? How do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a super big question. And I don't feel like I have a complete answer for it. But before I jump into answering, just to make sure we're working with the same definition here, the way I understand bleed is when the experiences and emotions and terrors and fears especially that a character is experiencing kind of bleed over into the real world, and the player starts experiencing it on a visceral, personal, this became real for me kind of level.
Yes, that's what I'm asking for. That's what I'd like to explore.
Cool. So I think there's a few different answers. The first edition of Monsterhearts, I feel did not do a good job of providing any sort of tool set for addressing those kinds of experiences or those kinds of concerns. And given that Monsterhearts is it's a game where there are dysfunctional or abusive relationships explored through play. There's violence. There's fraught stories about kind of an unfinished sense of self and an unfinished self-knowledge around sexuality, and then jumping into like romantic and sexual relationships from there. There's a real possibility of triggering or deeply upsetting players who kind of get in over their head emotionally or don't realize that they're going to have a really personal experience through playing this game and then kind of get ambushed by it. I think the first edition didn't do a good job of addressing those things. And one person who like called that out in particular was Lillian Cohen Moore, who's a really cool gamer and writer and journalist, based on kind of her nudging me to rethink how I had handled that, or just failed to handle that, I guess, more than anything. In 2014, I wrote this PDF guide called Safe Hearts that was about kind of setting boundaries, using social tools for making sure that people had the ability to say, like, hey, I don't want this in the game, or like, hey, I need a few minutes to just catch my breath here. And so Safe Hearts was the first attempt that I had at actually addressing that question. One of the things that I said in Safe Hearts that I think is really important to think about, especially in like horror games or games that tread in uncomfortable, fraught emotional territory, is that not all discomfort is bad, but some definitely is. And it's important to differentiate between good discomfort and bad discomfort. And I likened it to, when you watch a horror movie, the whole point of watching a horror movie is to feel that good discomfort, to feel like you're on the edge of your seat, to feel afraid that things might not turn out well for people, and to feel kind of that surge of adrenaline and curiosity, and to be frantically hoping for good outcomes for these characters. The whole point of watching a horror movie is to feel a particular type of discomfort. At the same time, I think a lot of horror movies will venture into bad discomfort. A lot of them are pretty rife with misogyny and sexism and racism and kind of gratuitous, dehumanizing violence. Different people will react to different stuff, but the point is you're watching a horror movie to feel good discomfort, and sometimes along the way you end up feeling a lot of really bad discomfort. And I think that the same thing is true for Monsterhearts, that the reason that you sit down and play is to explore messy, fraught, uncomfortable situations, but you want to do that in a way where you feel safe. And I think that Bleed is a big part of this, that you want to tell stories about messy, chaotic, dysfunctional relationships, and people struggling to make sense of how to leave them, or how to fix them, or how to navigate them. You play the game in part for that content. And so just avoiding that content altogether is usually, for most groups, the wrong approach. You want to feel supported in exploring that content.
Right.
And you want to make sure that you feel engaged with it, but not like you are trapped within it. And so as far as handling Bleed, I think a really important thing, and something that Safe Hearts document advocates, is taking breaks. That way you can really get into your character, you can get into these problems, you can feel engaged and engrossed by the situation, but then, between scenes, having 30 seconds to chat, or to like release emotional tension, or to like crack jokes and laugh nervously about what just happened, I think is really helpful for giving you kind of a grounding experience of returning to the real world and returning to the table. Longer breaks where you actually get up from the table and leave for a few minutes, and go get a glass of water, go to the washroom, or eat a quick snack, or just get up and stretch, I think are also really important. And so I think that's my first piece of advice for people as far as navigating games with heavy bleed and kind of supporting that bleed, but also making sure that you don't mess people's hearts and brains up along the way, is to just take breaks, take a minute to get up from the table, check in between intense scenes. So that's one of the answers.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Avery. Before we move on to another, I did have a follow-up.
Yeah.
You talked about taking breaks. Is this the kind of situation where you would imagine, let's say I'm an MC sitting at a table, should I use my, kind of that read of the table for when a break should be taken, or should I really just set out that, like, let's just do breaks routinely because I don't know if I can read everyone? Like, what instinct would you rely on, or is instinct the right way to go?
I think both. I think every role-playing game session ever should involve at least one break where people get up and leave the table. If for no other reason than sitting in a chair for 4 hours and not moving your body at all leaves a lot of people's bodies feeling sore. But yeah, I also think that part of the job of the MC, in Monsterhearts especially, but in any Powered by the Apocalypse game, and GMing generally, like part of your job is to pay attention to the actual players sitting at the table. And, you know, like trying to read their body language and their facial expressions and figure out how to support them in having the best game possible. And I think that's not just the MC's job, that's everyone's job. But like as MC, you have tools specifically around scene framing, around people looking to you, and you make your reaction, you make your move. Like knowing that you have the ability to say like, all right, we're gonna cut there. Something big's gonna happen in this scene still, I think, but first, I want to end this on a cliffhanger and take a 5-minute break, or between scenes being like, this is the perfect time for a break. I think that's part of your job as MC, and that's what your tools allow you to support the group in taking breaks. And I think people like easily forget to otherwise. I'm talking about breaks a lot because I think it's an effective tool for not just giving people breathing room, but also redirecting the game. I think that a lot of the time someone introduces a certain type of fraught content and you see someone's uncomfortable. If you turn to them and be like, hey, Jenny, is it okay if we have that? Should we pull that? We can pull that if you want. We can use this X card tool to get rid of that content. Jenny's going to feel put on the spot. Jenny's going to be like, no, it's cool, it's cool. A lot of people have been socialized to believe that they should just say, no, it's fine, whenever they're asked those kinds of questions. So just calling for a break, checking in privately, reading the table. Those seem like really good tools for addressing a lot of needs at once.
If you, as an MC, push someone's buttons more or less, you see that, you take a break, and then you come back, is it a good idea as an MC to maybe throw them a softball the next scene to kind of go quote unquote easy on them? Or is that a bad idea?
I don't know. I think it depends on the player. I think it depends on the style of the MC. Like some MCs, I feel like frame scenes really aggressively, right? They're like, all right, we skip ahead a day. We're in this situation. The two of you are in this scene. I want to see this tone in this scene. Go. And others are much more lax and they follow the scene around and they're like, yeah, whatever you guys want to do. You want to go to the mall next? Sure, let's go to the mall next. And like a lot of MCs, like they waver between those points or they find a balance. But I think that if you've got an MC who's like, all right, next scene, we're in the cafeteria. It's you, and you. You are fighting over this topic. Go. And then all of a sudden they're playing softball with someone, and they're using kitty gloves and they're treating that person like they're fragile. I think that can backfire in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it depends on the player. It depends on the situation. It depends on the style of the MC and like the larger social context. I'm not really sure if there's a best practices single piece of advice.
Okay, thanks.
I think another thing that I would say is that as far as bleed, I think there is often pressure in gaming, especially at like convention gaming situations, to prioritize everyone playing the game to the end of the session. I just don't think it's the most important thing. And I think especially if you're playing games that are emotionally fraught, like people should feel empowered to leave if they need to leave. People should be empowered to be like, hey, that was actually really triggering and I need to talk about it for 5 minutes. I think those are really, really reasonable requests. And sometimes we create social situations where people feel pressured to just stick it out for another 2 hours. And just stick it out for another 2 hours of triggering content is bad advice to give to people.
Yeah.
Not to say that Monsterhearts is always triggering content, but like sometimes it can be for some people in some situations. And so that's, I think, an important part of Bleed, is that like not only should people be taking breaks and checking in gentle ways, but in addition, people should just like feel empowered to state their emotional needs or to bail on a session if it's not working for them or if it feels too intense for them or if it's triggering. So with all that said, taking breaks, prioritizing your own needs, I think the part of the reason that people like Monsterhearts is that it does have bleed. The game is evocative. The rules model sticky situations and dysfunctional relationships that people have seen, have lived through, have wonders and curiosities and fears about. And part of the reason that you play it is to experience that bleed. And I don't think that the bleed is a bad thing. I just think it's important to make sure that people feel supported in changing the direction of the game taking breaks, breathing, checking in with their own emotions, that kind of stuff. And as long as that stuff is happening, I think that most of the time that, oh my gosh, I'm feeling all these really intense emotions coming up for myself and in my body about this game experience is usually something that is actually like a gratifying part of the game.
Well, thanks, Avery. I'll tell you what, I would really like to open our brain up to a little bit of Monsterhearts talk specifically. Are you ready for that?
Yeah, definitely.
Open your brain. All right, as we are having this conversation, Monsterhearts 2 is still up, available on Kickstarter. Hopefully everybody's subscribed and listening to this so they can go in if you've missed out. I don't know how you've missed out. You can't miss out on this. But for those who don't quite know, the two or three who don't know Monsterhearts, one of the kind of big influences in the PBTA game system, tell us, what is the setting of Monsterhearts 2 and what's it about?
The setting is kind of an urban fantasy version of the real world. The game is set in high school. That high school tends to end up being in like a small, sleepy, foggy woodland New England town, though it could be set in any place where teenagers exist and high school exists. You play as teenagers who are secretly monsters, people who are going through all the turbulence of adolescence, the confusion of their sexual awakening, and these people are secretly monsters, and that means they have a lot of power and a lot of ability to do harm in order to get their needs met. And they're high schoolers, and so probably they're going to use that power in a bunch of complicated ways and make a bunch of decisions that cause fallout and that lead to confusing emotions and that lead to volatile relationships. And the game is about exploring those emotions and those relationships. The kind of monstrosity serves as an allegory or as a metaphor for a few different things: alienation and estrangement, but especially also of queerness.
Right.
In addition, the mechanics are built in such a way as to point towards a queer understanding of sexuality and desire as potentially confusing, potentially unpredictable, potentially fluid and shifting. And so part of Monsterhearts is these teenage characters being surprised by who they turn out to be, being surprised by what they turn out to want, and having to figure out how to respond to those situations.
What mechanics are different in Monsterhearts versus Apocalypse World?
To start with, the core ideas of Apocalypse World, a lot of them remain, but they've all been rewritten from the ground up. And so all of the basic moves that the main characters of the game interact with are different than the ones in Apocalypse World. Though a lot remains the same. Rolls with the dice are still rolling 2 dice and adding a stat, and there's a lot that's pretty familiar. The biggest change is that kind of standing in the place where history was, or HX was, in Apocalypse World, there's a mechanic called strings, and strings represent the power, emotional power and leverage that you have over other characters. There's a few different ways for characters to gain strings. The most central one is through one of the basic moves called Turn Someone On. And so part of what this represents is the ways in which adolescence is a confusing time and people are trying to figure out where their agency lies and how to survive and thrive in high school, which is like a pretty volatile environment. And there's a lot that's confusing, but what's definitely true is that if you can turn people on and if you can make people want you, that gives you some kind of power and leverage over them. So that's one of the places that strings comes from. There's a few others as well. Different types of monsters. So each of the playbooks of the game are called skins, and each skin has different ways of getting strings on people as well. But the default available for everyone all the time option is Turn Someone On. Unlike HX, which is a stat that does fluctuate, but is, you apply the stat repeatedly to rolls, strings are a currency that you spend. So if my character has 2 strings on yours, then I can spend one in this scene to add one, to add a bonus to my roll against you. I can spend one in the future to tempt your character to do what I want, which means dangling an experience point in front of them in order to do my nefarious bidding. And so strings are, I think, the biggest mechanical shift from Apocalypse World to Monsterhearts.
All right, Avery, what is your favorite move in a Monsterhearts 2, and why?
That's a great question. I'm just going to look at them for a second here.
You know what? I tell you what. Since we're talking about Monsterhearts 2, are there any drastically changed moves or new moves that you want to highlight and kind of call your favorite for right now?
Yeah, I think I have two different moves that come up for me as my favorites. The first remains very similar to its original form in the first edition, and that's Turn Someone On. I think that move underscores a lot of the assumptions of Monsterhearts and a lot of what I think is interesting and different about Monsterhearts.
Mm-hmm.
It's a move about engaging with sexuality and using that to try and gain power over people. Part of the way that that move works, or part of the advice and rules surrounding that move, is that people don't get to decide what turns their character on.
Right. When
someone says, like, I'm turning on Enrique, it's now up to the dice. And what Enrique finds hot, whether it's this or whether it's not, like, we find that out with the roll of the dice and with this moment of chance. And then everyone at the table has to make sense of the results of that roll, especially whoever's playing Enrique. And a part of that is that player, whoever's playing Enrique, like, being turned on doesn't mean you have to do any particular thing. It doesn't mean that your character has to, like, change their sense of self necessarily, but it does mean that you have to contend with that. You learn that is something that you find arousing or exciting or exhilarating in this moment, and you have to grapple with that in some way. And I think that's an interesting move.
Well, I love the new option. I love the new option on Turn Someone On for someone who gets it. Of I get embarrassed and act awkward. That's so good.
When I first showed that version of the Turn Someone On move to Daniel, my editor, he kind of scoffed at that option and was like, I don't know, that seems kind of toothless and not very consequential. But actually, it's proven to be really good in play so far as I've seen and as far as others have reported. The option to have this character get embarrassed and act awkward is great because it means they're being vulnerable in this scene. It means they've clearly got some set of feelings going on and they're communicating that accidentally. And I think any kind of scene where in Monsterhearts where, like, the characters are accidentally communicating a whole bunch about their feelings, it is great. And provides, like, a lot of interesting hooks for kind of carrying the story forward, or interesting buttons to press throughout the story moving forward.
Definitely.
So yeah, Turn Someone On is one of my favorites. The other is the basic move of pulling strings, which is when you spend a string on someone, it has one of these 4 impacts. In the first edition, strings, the gaining of strings was really exciting and accessible to players, and so people were really excited to gain a lot of strings. But the spending of strings side of the mechanics was too bulky, it was too wordy. You used to have a multi-page player reference, and it was on the second page, so it was buried.
Yeah.
And so as a result, there was this dynamic in some sessions, but especially with new players, where people would excitedly acquire emotional leverage over others and then never use it.
Yes, I have known string hoarders.
Yeah, and it's like not their fault. It's the fault of the mechanics and the presentation of those mechanics in the first edition. Like, it wasn't streamlined and accessible. And the new version, I think, is. The spending of strings is on the basic move list. The list of the things you can do with a string went down from, like, 9 options for when using them against a PC, and another 9 or 10 options when using them against an NPC, to just, like, these 4 options. And it managed to do that without losing a lot of content. And so I feel really excited about that move. It's one of my favorites because it's a lot more elegant and graceful and accessible now.
I like it as well. When I looked at it, I thought, oh, this is going to be a much more active economy now. That's exciting. That's really cool. Avery, you've got me itching to try out Monsterhearts 2 for the first time. Do you mind if we go act under fire?
Yeah, that sounds great.
It is time to act under fire. All right, now we are going to play a little bit of Monsterhearts 2. As usual, I'll be playing Plussy, the signature character for +1 forward. Take it away, Avery.
To start with, characters in Monsterhearts 2 have 4 stats: hot, cold, volatile, and dark. And for Plussy, for this little session, she's going to have a hot of 2, a cold of -1, a volatile of -1, and a dark of 1. So she is really good at turning people on, at being the center of attention, and at navel-gazing, sorrowful introspection, and less good at doing anything, really. So the scene here, it takes place in the school. Do you want to name the high school?
Oh, man, I think it's Gauntlet High School.
Gauntlet, do you say?
Gauntlet High School, that's right.
Gauntlet High School, okay. It's in Gauntlet, Alberta. It's a very small, conservative town.
Okay.
It has an oil industry that was booming. And then after the accident, the resource extraction companies have all left, and now everyone's unemployed. And that just, I think, has brought up the tensions across the entire community. There's a lot of men who are suddenly without work and are feeling really angry and despairing about that. That creates ripples in families. That creates ripples through the school. Anyways, there's just a lot of tension, and tempers are easily heated in this economic climate right now in Gauntlet. That doesn't matter to Plussy, though. Plussy's just a teen, and Plussy is in love. Plussy's definitely in love. The only problem, I think, is that she's not really sure to who, because she thought she was in love with her boyfriend, Marcel, who is brooding and has a slight accent and is really into bat symbolism for some reason.
Interesting. Okay, I can dig that.
Has he calls it a replica coffin, but it seems like it's actually just like an actual coffin in his bedroom. Anyways, he's weird, he's brooding, he's mysterious. She doesn't realize that he's a vampire yet. Anyway, she thinks she's into Marcel, but somehow finds herself in the janitorial closet with Cassidy. Plus, he's never kissed another girl before. Cassidy is really, really cool. And while they're making out, she kind of does this thing where she bites down on Plessy's lip. Plessy has had dreams about Cassidy repeatedly for weeks. Dreams where Cassidy turns into a hulking wolf creature. But it's probably nothing. It probably doesn't mean anything. She's definitely probably not a werewolf. That's preposterous.
Right. That's symbolism, like Freudy something.
Mm-hmm. So you are in the janitorial closet making out with Cassidy, and from behind you can hear the janitorial closet door open, and it doesn't just like creak open, like someone seems to like open it and just like slam it open. What's the first thought that rushes through your head?
Hide. Like, I'll try to hide behind Cassidy. I'll just move around to where Cassidy is blocking whatever is in the door.
Oh, right. Okay, so this person strides through the door, and your first instinct is to hide behind Cassidy and kind of nudge her forward into the spotlight of that one bare bulb hanging in the middle of this closet. It's your boyfriend. It's your boyfriend, Marcel. He doesn't look surprised to find you there. It looks like he strode in here with a purpose to confront you. And Cassidy is like, "What the hell, man? Marcel isn't talking yet. Yeah. What do you do?"
Hey, Marcel, what's going on?
Marcel continues not talking, but he steps forward another 2 or 3 steps, and then he's like right in the middle of the room, and he's right underneath that bare bulb, dangling like a couple of feet above his head, on one of those strings, and so he's like really, really dramatically lit, but he still doesn't say anything. There's not a lot of room where you are. Hey, you're kind of like tucked into the corner right behind Cassidy, and so... Yeah,
I'm probably like right by the mop bucket, and this is kind of smelly, but I always put up with it before, but now it's kind of super noticeable.
Yeah, you, I think you can feel Cassidy's back stiffen and her arms tense up, and, you know, because she's kind of pressed right up against you almost. It seems like you can hear her heart beating faster and louder. Though maybe that's just an illusion. She seems tensed and like she's gonna maybe try and bolt or do something stupid.
I put my arm around her stomach just to kind of hold her for a second, but I'm watching Marcel. Listen, we don't need to... We should talk about this after school. Please? Like later.
Alright, so just to narrate a little bit of the process right now, I, as MC, am not really sure where to take this scene.
Sure.
The most obvious path is for Marcel and Cassidy to start fighting, but I don't think that's interesting in terms of seeing what Plussy does. And Plussy's the main character, and part of my job as the MC is to be a fan of Plussy. So I'm just looking down at my list of reactions here, and settling on expose a dangerous secret to the wrong person. Now, as an MC, I usually not narrate any of that. But since this is for a podcast audience, I was just letting people in on a little bit of my process.
I love it. It's like when Madden draws up on the board for football. We just saw a little diagram there.
Exactly, yeah. There's just some circles and X's and random seating lines. Marcel glares at you and says, Tucker told me I'd find you in here kissing another girl. I didn't realize I'd find you here kissing a dog. And he spits at Cassidy. And Cassidy growls, which is kind of weird, I guess, and corrects him and says, wolf.
What? No, hey. And I slip around in front of Cassidy and interpose myself, which is the worst possible idea, but that's not cool. Okay, first of all, I hate Tucker now. Second of all, you're not going to spit on Cassidy. That is not... No. I said we will talk about this after school. That's not cool.
At this point, I want to talk about strings, because strings are an important thing to consider in this situation. They're the leverage that these characters have on each other. And so we've got a few strings in this situation. Because you totally turned Cassidy on before you guys started making out in the storage closet, you have a string on Cassidy. And because Marcel is a territorial boyfriend, and he's been working to secure emotional leverage for a while, he's got a string on you.
Okay.
And I think at this point, Marcel is spending his string. He's offering an experience point to do what he wants. So he's offering it to you. He says, Plussy, I don't want you seeing this girl. She's not good for you. You don't know what she is. You don't want to know what she is. I want you to promise me that you're going to stay away from her.
And he's
spending his solitary string on you to offer you an experience point in this moment. Just promise that you will trust me that she's not like us and stay away from her. She's dangerous.
I look back at Cassidy and then I refuse the experience point. Not like us. You sleep in a coffin, man. You're not like us.
Cass turns to you and puts kind of like a sympathetic hand on your shoulder and says, do you want to get out of here? And of course, Marcel's still blocking the door, and so that's a pretty fraught proposition. But sorry, what was your response?
Yeah, I want to get out of here. Just let us go, Marcel. There doesn't have to be a fight, but I think we're done.
Okay, so Marcel steps aside and kind of does this like sweeping hand gesture of like, by all means, and creates space for the two of you to walk. I think like the moment that the two of you get out of the closet, starts yelling and berating you and kind of like follows you out of their closet, like yelling. Mostly Cassidy, it seems like. A lot of, I never want to see you again. The next time I see you, you're dead meat. Really intense. And there's, I don't know, is this in the middle of class time or is this like in the middle of lunch?
I think it's in the middle of lunch. Because I wouldn't blow off class. I want to get a scholarship. Because Dad says that, we don't have the kind of money to... And I really don't want to have to deal with a loan, and the work study program is a bitch, so...
Yeah, you've got your eyes set on bigger sites than Gauntlet.
I do.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people in the hallway then. And they see you and Cassidy leaving. Cassidy's like got maybe her hand placed like in a reassuring but intimate way on like the small of your back. And there's Marcel screaming bloody murder at the two of you.
Oh, that's it. I turn around. I'm not going to let him embarrass me. And also, I'm not entirely sure that I want the whole thing about me and Cassidy to be out. So I turn around and I say, you need to back off. This is not cool. And I look around at the other people because I'm relatively popular. So maybe I could just tell him to back off and shut him down here.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like you are... I mean, I get the impression that you're dumping Marcel, that this is the end of your relationship.
That's it!
He is screaming threats and he is puffing up his ego, and you are just like coolly and calmly telling him off and shutting him down.
I am.
That sounds like a basic move right there. Specifically shut someone down.
Okay. Unfortunately, I have a -1 to cold, but yeah, feeling confident. I'm sure this will go well. What's the worst that could happen? Yeah, I rolled an 8 with my -1. That makes it a 7.
Awesome. So turning to those basic moves on shut someone down, that text says on a 7 to 9. So you shut him down, and you choose one of these options from below. Either he loses a string on you, he gains a condition, or you carry one forward. We haven't talked about carrying one forward, but it's the same as take +1 forward. Conditions are social, like they're gossip, and they are social, and they're things that people are saying about you that have leverage and that can be used to hurt you. So you could give Marcel a condition, you could boost your own ego up moving forward, or you could steal away his string. He doesn't have any more strings, though.
I'm always wanting +1 forward to be part of +1 forward, but I really think giving him a condition sounds the most fun to me. So I'm going to give him a condition of, I don't know, like creeper?
Perfect.
Yeah, because he's yelling at me in the middle of the hallway and it's totally not cool. He's just some kind of creeper.
That sounds great. So Marcel has the condition creeper. The final part of that shut someone down move on a 7 to 9, it's choose one from below. But you leave a sour impression, and so they give you a condition in return.
Oh!
You were kind of just caught by the school leaving the janitorial closet, which people go to make out and hook up. That's the only reason that two kids would wander into there. You were just caught leaving that place with Cassidy, with your boyfriend angrily yelling at you in pursuit. You put him in his place and you shut him down, but then he kind of like sniffles and kind of hunches his shoulders forward a bit and has like this crocodile tear slowly streak down his face. And he says, "It's just Plussy. You know I have trust issues." And his voice wavers. And so I think that you got the condition unloyal.
So true.
And Cassidy says, my motorcycle's in the side parking lot as long as you don't mind not wearing a helmet.
Okay. Well, let's go.
And that seems like a perfect spot to end the little game.
Absolutely. That was super fun, Avery. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Avery, thank you so much for coming on +1 forward. For anyone who's interested and hasn't already backed it, you gotta jump in to the Kickstarter before it ends up. Monsterhearts 2 is live as this comes out, and if you jump on that Kickstarter, follow the link that's in the show notes, and it's already done. Keep your eyes peeled. I know that with Avery's prolific writing that it will be fully out before too awful long, and then everybody in the public can get it too. But jump on the Kickstarter if you haven't already. Thanks again so much, Avery, for coming on and making time for +1 forward.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. That was really fun.
+1 forward is a production of the Gauntlet community and Richard Rogers. You can find us on gauntlet-rpg.com or follow us on Twitter at GauntletRPG. The games mentioned on this show use the Apocalypse engine, which is a creation of Vincent and McGay Baker. The music for +1 forward is from the Savage Arl Hotbed CD Gomi Daiko. The songs used are Gomi Daiko Metal version and Process. You can find more amazing tunes by Savage Arl Hotbed on their website, savagearlhotbed.com.